1 minute ago, Diddy gets crazy as celebrity stylist testifies Cassie was hunted and brutalized. On May 28, 2025, at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, the trial of Sean Diddy Combs reached a critical turning point. Diddy, once hailed as the king of American hip-hop, now faces federal charges of sexual violence, human trafficking, coercion, and racketeering. The allegations describe a disturbing pattern of physical abuse, manipulation, and criminal conduct carried out under the guise of entertainment and business operations. The case is being prosecuted under the RICO Act, a law originally designed to dismantle organized crime groups. According to federal prosecutors, Diddy used his companies, especially Bad Boy Entertainment, as cover for a network of criminal acts. These include violent assaults, forced sexual encounters, extortion, and psychological control over individuals closely tied to him, most notably artist and former partner Cassie Ventura. Warning: this video contains verified testimonies and explicit details of abuse, coercion, and systemic control. All information presented is based on sworn court records and official legal proceedings. Viewer discretion is advised. The courtroom on day 11 was tense, packed with journalists, legal analysts, and spectators anticipating explosive testimony. Reporting live, Ashley Banfield captured the heightened atmosphere as a new witness stepped forward to testify in what is becoming one of the most damning federal celebrity trials in recent memory. The day opened with testimony from LAPD officer Chris Ignacio, who detailed a 2011 burglary response at Kid Cudi's Hollywood Hills residence. He recounted spotting a suspicious black Escalade with dark-tinted windows. Though he did not stop the vehicle, he memorized its license plate, 6LKN013. That same vehicle returned to the scene later that day, prompting the officer to run the plate. It was registered to Bad Boy Productions. This connection placed Diddy's corporate entity at the center of a potential criminal incident. Prosecutors used it to support their argument that Diddy employed corporate resources to execute and cover up criminal acts. Arson investigator Lance Jimenez followed with testimony regarding a suspicious car fire at the same residence weeks later. Evidence at the scene suggested an attempted firebombing, a sliced canvas roof on a Porsche, a malt liquor bottle, a designer scarf partially burned, and a red BIC lighter. The Molotov cocktail failed to ignite fully, but Jimenez warned that if it had, the fire could have engulfed the car garage and surrounding area. The most shocking revelation came when Jimenez disclosed that fingerprint cards collected after the initial burglary had been destroyed by LAPD personnel in August 2012. He emphasized that he did not authorize this destruction and only recently learned of it. When asked whether such destruction had ever been ordered by someone outside his team, objections from Diddy's defense exploded. They called for a mistrial, accusing the prosecution of implying that Diddy had influenced law enforcement. The judge denied the mistrial motion, but instructed the jury to disregard any such implication. Then came a turning point in the trial testimony from celebrity stylist Deontay Nash. Formerly employed by Diddy and Cassie, Nash reluctantly took the stand. He was not involved in any lawsuit and expressed that he did not want to be there. However, what he witnessed during his time working with the couple compelled him to speak. Nash described a brutal pattern of psychological and physical abuse. He detailed 3 violent incidents where he directly witnessed Diddy assaulting Cassie. The first happened before a major music festival, with Cassie asleep on a couch. Diddy, angry she had not answered his calls, allegedly pulled her by the hair and beat her until her head hit a bed frame and she bled. According to Nash, Diddy then blamed the witnesses and said, "They have plastic surgery for that." The second occurred when Diddy unexpectedly arrived at Cassie's apartment and forced both her and Nash out. Security reportedly blocked Nash from leaving, constituting unlawful detention. The third assault happened in public in a studio parking lot. Diddy slapped Cassie in the face and ordered Nash to remove her. These testimonies were consistent with a wider pattern. Nash claimed Diddy threatened to destroy Cassie's career, blackmail her with explicit videos, and control every aspect of her professional and personal life. He described Cassie's fear, her efforts to escape, and the pressure she faced to return. Nash also shared disturbing details about Cassie being forced to prepare bags of sex toys for hotel stays, and how she would return from those nights exhausted. He recalled incidents where she had visible injuries, including 2 black eyes, during a FaceTime call from Las Vegas. One of her albums, despite being critically acclaimed, was never released, something Nash attributed to Diddy's control. On cross-examination, Nash remained firm. He emphasized his reluctance to testify and clarified that he had no legal claims against Diddy. He stated he had retained legal counsel purely for protection. When asked about Diddy's role in Cassie's branding, he acknowledged Diddy's financial investment, but underscored that Cassie lacked creative freedom. The defense tried to argue that Diddy's team did not enable violence, but instead attempted to intervene. However, Nash's testimony presented a system in which fear, coercion, and control ruled. He even recalled moments when Diddy's security searched his home for Cassie. As the day ended, courtroom observers agreed on one thing: this was a devastating blow to Diddy's defense. The prosecution had successfully outlined a pattern of criminal behavior tied to an organized structure, evidence crucial to RICO charges. With the trial far from over, day 11 marked a dramatic shift in momentum. Diddy appeared less composed. His interactions with his legal team slowed. His courtroom demeanor changed. A man once celebrated for power and influence now sat at the center of a federal case with allegations that struck at the core of that very power. The courtroom had shifted, and Diddy, for the first time, looked vulnerable. By the morning of May 29, 2025, headlines across the country had seized upon the prior day's explosive testimony. Major outlets led with quotes from Deontay Nash's courtroom appearance. Clips of Ashley Banfield's coverage were trending on social media, with legal experts dissecting every second of footage. And inside the courthouse, the tone had changed. The audience no longer came for celebrity intrigue, they came to witness the unraveling of a public figure accused of systemic abuse. The prosecution resumed its case with renewed momentum. Lead prosecutor Elena Vasquez opened the session with a brief summary of what had already been established: 3 verified acts of violence witness testimony, detailing psychological control threats to release explicit content, and a credible link between Diddy's enterprise and acts of intimidation against Kid Cudi. She emphasized the stakes. This is no longer about fame or influence. This is about power used to harm, control, and silence. The first witness of the day was an IT specialist from a cloud security firm. Subpoenaed records from Bad Boy's internal servers confirmed the existence of multiple video files stored in encrypted folders, labeled with dates, hotel names, and initials matching known victims. The IT specialist walked the jury through metadata showing that these files had been accessed shortly after Cassie announced plans to leave the relationship. One folder's last access date was the same day Cassie flew to New York for a record label meeting without informing Diddy. The file was titled Sans DOLV 09.12 MP4. The metadata showed it was opened at 3:22 a.m. hours before Cassie received a threatening text message from a blocked number: "Don't forget what's on tape." The jury was silent. The courtroom could hear chairs shift and pens stop moving. The defense objected to admitting the contents of the folders into evidence, citing privacy concerns. But the judge ruled the metadata admissible. The videos themselves were sealed and reviewed only by the judge in chambers. Next, the prosecution called Mia, a pseudonym used for courtroom protection, a former assistant who worked for Diddy's team from 2013 to 2016. Her testimony brought a different kind of weight: administrative insight. Mia explained her job involved coordinating hotel suites, tracking Cassie's whereabouts, and making sure NDAs were signed. Everything was about control, she said. "I didn't realize it at first. I thought it was celebrity logistics. but after a while it felt more like surveillance. Mia testified that she was once instructed to destroy a handwritten note left by Cassie in a hotel room. The note addressed to her mother read, "If anything happens to me, I didn't leave. Please ask Deontay." The prosecution held the jury's attention with precision. Every witness added another thread to a net designed to trap not just a man, but the system he built around himself. When Mia described Diddy's inner circle, referring to her as the handler, the courtroom reacted visibly. She said it was an open secret that Cassie had no privacy hotel room. Cameras were sometimes requested under the guise of security, but files were directed to private servers. The defense continued to push back, trying to distance Diddy from the actions of employees. They emphasized that celebrities often have intense logistical needs, but the repeated emphasis on surveillance, intimidation, and threats suggested something far more deliberate. Then came another critical moment. The prosecution called Officer Raul Martinez, a retired NYPD detective who had worked an off-the-books investigation into celebrity harassment cases. Martinez explained how his inquiries into multiple incidents involving Diddy, including threats against journalists and former staff, were repeatedly stalled or dismissed. He produced internal memos showing that local precincts had received complaints but were allegedly discouraged from pursuing them due to potential civil complications. In one document, an unnamed official advised, "This is above our pay grade. Don't escalate." That quote was read aloud in court. The weight of it landed like a hammer. Martinez closed his testimony by recounting a time when he was followed for 2 days after visiting a former bad boy employee who had filed a harassment complaint. "It wasn't paranoia," he said. "I took photos. I have the plates. They were registered to a shell company traced back to Combs Capital Holdings." At this point, the defense objected aggressively. The judge called for a recess, and the jury was escorted out. After a 30-minute review, the judge allowed the testimony to continue, stating, "The jury will determine what they believe, but this court will not suppress credible testimony simply because it implicates influence." The cultural reaction outside the courtroom was swift. By the afternoon, the hashtag #JacquesHandlerFiles was trending on multiple platforms. Commentators began calling this trial a test of whether the justice system could confront fame and fear in equal measure. Cable networks switched from panel debates to live coverage blocks. Even late-night hosts, typically cautious with legal stories, opened with serious commentary. Back in the courtroom, the final witness of the day brought a powerful close. A former Bad Boy Records audio engineer testified under oath that he was once instructed to edit screams out of background tracks recorded in hotel rooms. When he asked why, he was told, "Keep it clean. You're not paid to feel things." His voice cracked on the stand. He said the project was eventually scrapped, but the files remained archived, misfiled, under non-musical directories. As court adjourned, the judge thanked the jury for their attention. Diddy sat motionless. No whispering to his attorneys. No eye contact with the gallery. For a man who had once controlled every room he walked into, this was the first time the room moved without him. Day 12 had not simply built on Day 11, it had detonated it. With evidence, patterns, and emotion, the prosecution made one thing clear. This trial is no longer just about proving guilt. It's about exposing a structure of silence, and whether for the first time someone powerful will finally be held accountable. Today, May 30th, 2025. The courthouse was silent before opening arguments resumed. What began as a high-profile celebrity trial had now evolved into a full-blown cultural moment. News outlets had cleared their schedules. Media vans lined the block. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a national reckoning on power, silence, and justice. Inside, prosecutors wasted no time. Elena Vasquez began with a sharp recap. This case is not about rumors. It's about record logs, video files, employment contracts, and survivor testimony. It's about control executed through fear and violence. The first witness was a forensic accountant, his job to follow the money. He showed that multiple shell companies under Combs Capital Holdings had paid large, unexplained sums to individuals later identified as witnesses, former assistants, or alleged victims. Some payments were listed as consulting fees or brand strategy, but the recipients never performed services. Several of them, the witness explained, signed NDAs shortly after receiving the money. The data showed a pattern. Payments clustered around events like police investigations, media inquiries, or breakups with known partners. One striking example, a $75,000 wire transfer to a former housekeeper, made just 2 days after she was reportedly questioned about missing camera footage from Diddy's Bel Air property. The jury listened closely. Charts and timelines filled the projector screen. The defense objected, but the evidence stood. Then came what court observers began calling the Cassie tapes timeline. Using subpoenaed access logs, a digital evidence analyst confirmed that over a 5-year span, more than 24 files, labeled with hotel names and dates, were repeatedly opened, copied, and shared across secured internal networks. These networks were accessible to only 3 email addresses, one belonging to Diddy, the others to senior staff. The prosecution was careful to avoid playing or quoting the tapes. Their aim was not to shock, but to show control. This wasn't about sex. This was about surveillance, Vasquez told the court. This was about leverage. Midday, the courtroom heard from a former entertainment lawyer who once represented 2 women involved with bad boy-affiliated events. She testified under subpoena, visibly shaken. According to her, both clients described being isolated, coerced into unwanted sexual encounters, and later threatened into silence. One client told me she was flown out for what she thought was a performance gig. When she landed, she was told she had to attend a VIP loyalty dinner. There were no guests, just Diddy, a bodyguard, and 2 cameras. She tried to leave. Her return flight was canceled without notice. The courtroom was quiet. They called it freak off, the attorney added. That's the term multiple clients used. Another name began circulating in court documents and whispered conversations. Christina Coincidental, Diddy's former assistant, turned operations lead. She had not yet been subpoenaed, but the prosecution hinted that her cooperation was being negotiated. In response, the defense struck back hard. Lead attorney Mark G. grilled the forensic accountant on whether any money explicitly stated it was hush money. He pressed the lawyer witness on whether any of her clients had gone public. He tried to reframe the prosecution's case as circumstantial, built on hearsay and driven by media pressure. But each answer seemed to reinforce the prosecution's point. No, the payments weren't labeled hush money, but the timing, the pattern, and the silence were consistent. No, the victims didn't go public because they were afraid. Then, in an unexpected move, the prosecution introduced a new subpoena, internal text between Diddy and a logistics coordinator. One message dated June 17, 2015 read, "Make sure the suite has cameras ready." Same as Vegas. Don't mess this up. Another message from the same thread. If she says no, shut it down. We don't need another leak. The defense tried to argue that the context was unclear, but the weight of the week's testimonies made interpretation difficult to dismiss. Court adjourned. With an unusual moment, the judge instructed jurors to ignore the trending headlines and memes being shared online. Justice is not a hashtag, she said. It's your duty to stay grounded in facts, not reactions. Outside, however, the cultural storm continued. More former employees were rumored to be preparing statements. Advocacy groups began organizing rallies. And industry figures who once endorsed Diddy's empire started deleting old collaborations from their social media. As evening news shows aired specials titled "The Fall of a Mogul," it became clear this trial had already reshaped public perception regardless of the final verdict. But in the courtroom, the prosecution was far from finished. They had more records, more testimony, and according to Vasquez, at least 2 more key witnesses who haven't yet taken the stand. May 30 ends not with answers, but with a question that now echoes across the nation. What happens when the most powerful person in the room is finally forced to listen? And when will the silence break for good? That same afternoon, May 30th, 2025, the prosecution made clear it was not finished. With the court returning from recess, lead prosecutor Elena Vasquez introduced the next phase of her strategy, establishing a consistent network of cover-ups and intimidation not only within Diddy's business empire, but extending into his social and legal circles. The first witness was Jerome Keller, a former senior contractor with a digital security firm that had served several entertainment clients, including Bad Boy Entertainment. Keller testified under subpoena, stating that his team had been instructed to install closed-circuit surveillance inside luxury suites rented by Combs and his team. He clarified these weren't standard security systems. The equipment was designed for discretion, not protection. The cameras were hidden in smoke detectors, thermostats, even light fixtures. Keller's team received recurring requests to extract and compile footage into labeled folders and deliver it to an encrypted external drive, always via the same courier. He said these jobs were always flagged as urgent and paid in cash. When asked who initiated these requests, Keller identified an operations manager at Combs Capital and noted the jobs were often scheduled hours before known private events. Cross-examination attempted to undermine Keller's credibility, suggesting the firm worked with many clients and that equipment could have been misused without Diddy's knowledge. But Keller maintained the pattern was specific, repeatable, and always tied to Combs' private engagements. The next witness shifted focus. Erica Daniels, a former legal assistant at a boutique law firm that handled multiple settlements involving high-profile figures. Daniels testified she worked on at least 4 non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, involving parties who had direct contact with Diddy between 2017 and 2022. She explained that while the NDAs were legally drafted to address generic terms like privacy and defamation, the internal memos were more explicit. In one memo, the phrase, "resolve exposure risk re-LV recording incident" appeared. In another, a settlement was categorized internally as urgent silencing Cassie collateral. When asked what that meant, Daniels hesitated before replying, "That was the language used in internal tracking." A brief stir went through the courtroom. Daniels also confirmed that settlements often included a clause requiring the recipient to surrender all personal devices for 48 hours, prior to signing, ostensibly for legal review, but often managed by Combs' private tech team. She testified that this was unusual and noted that objections from plaintiffs' legal counsel were often met with threats of withdrawal or litigation. The defense attempted to distance Combs from these actions, arguing that settlements are handled by third parties and that the language Daniels referenced could be interpreted differently. But the cumulative implication was becoming hard to deny. By 3:45 p.m., the next witness was called a former dancer and choreographer named Kiara Simmons. Her name had never appeared in the press in relation to Diddy. She walked in with visible tension and was granted partial anonymity and limited courtroom access. Simmons testified she worked on a short-term contract during a tour event in 2019. She said she was invited to a post-show gathering at a hotel suite under the impression it was a casual team celebration. But once inside, she described a situation that turned coercive quickly. She said the doors were locked electronically, security was posted outside, and alcohol was distributed aggressively. Within 30 minutes, Simmons claimed Diddy directed her to entertain a guest. When she refused, she was allegedly threatened with professional blacklisting. He said, "People who say no disappear in this business," she recalled. She managed to leave the room later that night after convincing a junior staffer she felt sick. She said she was never hired again by any Bad Boy-affiliated projects. The courtroom was quiet. Jurors looked down at their notes. Some appeared shaken. Vasquez then displayed internal text messages recovered from a corporate device. One message, believed to be from the operations manager, read, KS said no, mark her, no callback. The defense tried to suggest this could reference anything, a missed audition, a scheduling issue, but the timing aligned with Simmons' testimony, and the phrasing echoed themes from earlier witnesses. Outside the courthouse, the scene was changing. Protesters had begun gathering with signs reading, "Silence is violence, and we believe survivors." Reporters noted that the case had moved beyond legal scrutiny. It was now a movement. Former employees from various parts of the entertainment industry began submitting anonymous letters to media outlets. Hashtags like Diddy trial, witness marked, and not a freak off were trending across platforms. Inside the final moments of the session returned to strategy. Vasquez confirmed the prosecution would request to introduce prior bad acts from unrelated civil complaints that were dismissed but documented. The defense bristled, calling it character assassination. The judge reserved ruling, but allowed a preview of those filings. The preview revealed an unsettling detail. A 2021 settlement involving a woman referred to only as DJ contained a paragraph outlining an incident where she was allegedly told, "You signed up for this. We own the night." As the day closed, Vasquez spoke directly to the jury. The question is no longer if there was a system. The question is how many people it harmed before someone said enough. Diddy did not look up. The judge adjourned for the day. There were no dramatic exits, just a quiet courtroom, the shuffling of papers, and the unmistakable momentum of truth gaining ground. As the 12th day of Sean Combs' federal trial concluded, the courtroom emptied with little spectacle. No major developments were expected. After the final witness of the day, Kiara Simmons, delivered her impactful testimony. The media, though still stationed outside, had no immediate access to further proceedings. The court remained sealed for post-session legal arguments between both parties. Inside the chambers, legal teams worked under strict confidentiality. The defense remained visibly agitated. After the final exchange over the admissibility of past civil complaints, Diddy's lead counsel filed a motion to restrict any introduction of character-based evidence not tied directly to criminal charges. Prosecutor Elena Vasquez responded with a formal objection requesting the court allow limited review of those materials under judicial oversight. The judge took both motions under advisement and adjourned. There were no press conferences. The U.S. Marshals escorted the jury and key witnesses through the service corridor to avoid outside interference. Diddy exited through the private security route, flanked by his legal team, eyes downcast, refusing to take questions. Reporters filed basic summaries of the day's events. Additional support for the RICO charge expanded testimony around alleged patterns of coercion, and the court's pending decision on whether prior civil cases could be partially referenced. There were no public filings revealing the witness list for Day 13, and sources inside the prosecutor's office declined to comment. The official court record for the day closed at 5:34 p.m. The streets around the courthouse began to clear. A few observers lingered at the barricades, but no demonstrations or media events followed. Unlike previous nights, there were no public statements from attorneys, no leaked footage, and no social media flare-ups with substantial weight. Inside legal circles, however, the tone had shifted. Multiple attorneys who had been monitoring the case noted that the prosecution's approach was unusually methodical. One remarked, "They're building a house brick by brick. No theatrics, just structure." That evening, the Department of Justice quietly confirmed that the trial remained narrowly scoped to the existing RICO and associated criminal charges. Speculation about additional indictments or federal expansions remained for the moment just that, speculation. By the time dusk settled over Lower Manhattan, the court's silhouette was framed only by a few security lights and a handful of photographers packing up gear. The story would continue, but for now, Day 12 ended as it began, inside a courtroom, under oath and still unresolved. The final segment of the broadcast resumed with a quiet urgency. No dramatic closing music, no sensationalized graphics, just Ashley Banfield back on screen, her tone steady but unwavering. Deontay Nash is expected back tomorrow to finish his cross-examination. She began addressing viewers still riveted by the stylist's explosive testimony. And after that, buckle up again, because all eyes will turn to a woman known only as Mia. That's a pseudonym, not her real name. She is a witness who, according to prosecutors, was in the room the night Sean Combs allegedly beat Cassie Ventura unconscious in her apartment. The camera cut to archival footage of Cassie from music videos, and red carpets a silent montage against Banfield's voiceover. Mia is also believed to be the same person who tried to intervene during one of the documented attacks, the same person Deontay said was thrown aside when she tried to protect Cassie. Her testimony could link two first-hand witness accounts into one consolidated narrative. Banfield returned on screen. She's likely going to be on the stand for the rest of the week. Prosecutors have told the court they may streamline their remaining witness list, aiming to rest their case by the second week of June. There was a pause before she continued. And if Deontay Nash was any preview of what's ahead, things are going to get worse for Diddy before they get better, if they get better at all. Her delivery slowed deliberate now. I've covered trials for 2 decades, but what unfolded in this courtroom isn't just another celebrity scandal. What we heard today was layered with systemic failure, corporate complicity, and personal brutality. A man at the top of a global brand allegedly used his power to silence, to threaten to destroy one life at a time. A brief segment from Diddy's hotel surveillance video, now familiar to many, was played in muted slow motion. The impact spoke for itself. Banfield didn't narrate over it. And full disclosure, she finally added, I and others in this industry are being sued by Sean Combs for our coverage of this trial. Those lawsuits are unresolved. She looked directly at the camera. That doesn't change the facts. And the facts are stacking up under oath on video in statements and scars. The closing line returned to the show's branding, but did not lose its journalistic gravity. Thanks for watching. I'm Ashley Banfield. This is Drop Dead Serious. And the truth, it's not just serious, it's drop dead serious. The screen faded to black, leaving behind only a stark graphic, the government's case ongoing. No conclusions, no verdicts, just the weight of testimony still echoing beyond the courtroom.